Hello, everybody. We're here to launch our new series, How to Regenerate Yourself Like the Long Living. The journey begins. This series is presented by myself and Dr. John Apsley, who's here today. In-depth studies conducted over the last century have identified about 5 blue zone regions where people live essentially without chronic disease, and commonly they don't start their aging process until they reach the age of 80 and 90. Amazing. Compare that to us in the United States, where we start to face degeneration by the age of 35 and face chronic illnesses by our late 50s or 60s. Of course, we know aging is coming on all of us, but sometimes it's surprising how fast it can happen. Today, we're kicking off our first of its kind, a new series called How to Regenerate Yourself Like the Long Living. So I'm hoping that you're taking notes that are going to help you today. The series is perfect for anyone who wants to learn the framework and protocols and how we use it in our environment to regenerate thousands of patients like the long living. The series includes webinars, which you'll get announcements for, and it also includes email blasts and workshops, which you'll be hearing about as we move forward. I'd like to introduce Dr. John Apsley, who's joining me in this series. I'd like to welcome him. Welcome.
Hello, everyone.
Dr. John Apsley, for the past 40 years, has studied firsthand and written about how the long-living cultures regenerate, and then successfully applied it to clinical practice in those with advanced chronic disease, including immune dysfunction and cancer. So I'm very excited to have you here on our webinar series.
Well, thanks, Sangeeta.
You're a true expert.
It's a pleasure being here. Thank you.
So, Dr. Apsley has inspired me to explore the parallels between the way in which the long living regenerate and Sejun's 5-point model system that we've successfully used for 15 years to reverse over 80% of all conditions. The exercise has simultaneously opened up a world of opportunity to explore advanced methods that I have applied to filling the gaps and accelerate full recovery and regeneration in many more patients than 80%. Very exciting. Today, we're going to cover the magic of the blue zones, how the 5-point model system approximates the natural blue zone system. This is what you will be taking home. What are the gaps? And as the series progresses, we will be getting into detail as to how do we address each area, the gaps, and that forms the basis of our new series. The magic of the blue zones. Let's see what some people in the blue zones experience. Let's meet some of them. Gianluca Cola is a 99-year-old Icarian man who takes a 3-mile walk uphill every day to tend the goats. He has a job to do. He has a purpose. Stamatis Moriatis on Icaria Island moved there from Boynton Beach, Florida, when he was diagnosed with terminal lung cancer at the age of mid-60s. He arrived at the island, which was his place of ancestry, and lay in his bed waiting to die. He then started to mix and mingle with his childhood friends, laugh, spend his evenings socializing, eating, waiting to die. Next, he started absorbing the sunshine and the ocean air. And finally, he ended up working at the vineyard where he died at the age of 102. How do these people do it? Their annual income is less than $1,000 per capita per year. How do they achieve these results? Our healthcare spending alone in the United States is above $9,000 per year on healthcare alone. In Icaria, people stay up late, they wake up late, they take naps. They take naps, that's real important. Somebody give me a nap. We simply don't care about the clock. They continue to have active sexual lives. What's the secret? Note this woman connected to the earth. Is it moving naturally and climbing steps? Of course, that's part of it. Is it dancing in celebration? Is this something that's part of all these cultures? Or is it the 9 areas that I want Dr. Apsley to start covering?
This is very interesting. A lot of the researchers, the anthropologists, are looking at these 4 areas that you're now looking at. These people move naturally. They have a tremendous amount of physical fitness in their daily life. Their outlook, their emotional and psychological outlook on life is very bright. They have a purpose. They keep themselves in a stress-free state for long periods of time during the day by napping and by also laughing. They eat very wisely. They have an 80% rule that I believe is mostly about raw foods and leaving the stomach not entirely full so that digestion can be complete, and it's high in fiber. Also, the family units, giving the elderly an extreme purpose to help educating the younger groups, happen almost at every mealtime. So is it all about lifestyle? Well, for the past 40 years, I've been looking at what the real secrets are that underlie what we just discussed here, and it really starts with the environment. We're looking at their water, we're looking at their soil, we're looking at their pristine environment, the air, the sunshine. We do know from a quote from the NIH that up to 90% of all cancers in the United States are caused by environmental toxins. These people are free of those. So if you add to that their celebration of life, their joyfulness, how they're connected, and the food chain, you then begin to discover some of the mysteries here, some of the secrets. So let's start with the most important one, I think. It starts their food chain. Their waters that they get to irrigate their farmlands are extremely mineral rich. They either come from glaciers, such as you're seeing here during the spring melt, and if it's a volcanic source, as it is with both of these photographs here, both the one that you see in the mountaintop, but also the next one in the Hunza Valley, this volcanic ash has been turned into submicron size mineral particles that are changed into a colloid system of nutrients that the entire system of soil bacteria, plants, animals, and then humans turn into regenerative nourishment. So when the water starts traveling down with these heavy loads of minerals, they form whirlpools. And the whirlpools at the apex, down at the bottom, cause an acceleration of the water that approaches infinity. Not the speed, but the actual acceleration effect from the top of the vortex down to the bottom. And this causes a warping of the water molecule that locks in these minerals, making the water more wet, able to deliver nutrients better and pull out toxins better.
Wow, that's really important.
So when we talk about regenerative nourishment, we're really going to get into that in subsequent parts of the series, but we can say that it starts with the colloidal mineral content of the water. Now, colloids mean suspensions. These are not things that are dissolved in the water. It causes plants to be able to grow effectively without pesticides and without additional fertilizer, because the bacteria is so enhanced in its growth that when it dies, it produces the real most magical part of the fertilizer system in this food chain. Now, the animals eating those plants raw, they benefit from these regeneration factors, and they are indeed regeneration factors. And then when we eat the animals or the animal byproducts, the milk, the eggs, things like that, we benefit as well.
This is a 132-year-old man in the Hunza Valley, benefiting from all those lovely, rich colloids and structured water. So what about structured water? Water obviously is extremely important. Let's just talk about water. Most of the human body is made out of water. So obviously, if you want to regenerate, you have to pay attention to the water. Alexis Carrel, a Nobel Prize winner, said that the life of a cell is immortal. It is the fluid in which it floats that degenerates. So it's about the fluid that it's surrounded by. And he proved this by keeping chick cells alive for 34 years by changing out the fluid in which the cells floated until someone changed the fluid with the wrong thing. So clean, pure water with regenerative nourishment is critical to regeneration. What about structure? What is structure? These three things are all made of carbon. Diamond, carbon structured one way makes a hard diamond. Structured another way makes soft graphite. And the third structure is coal. Another example would be quartz and glass, which are both silicon oxide, structured in different ways. So structure determines function, including water function, which depends on its structure. These people have structured water, which optimizes the function. And that structure comes from the colloids, the vortexes, and the rest of the process that occurs while it's making it down into the valley. What about the connection to the earth? When we walk with the naked feet, we do not forget the earth. And we know that the earth's magnetic beat or frequency is critical to the human life because it's actually synchronous with the frequency of the heart and the brain. Without it, human health declines. And the astronauts were able to prove that because without a Schumann generator, their lives degenerated. There's plenty of studies showing that grounding reduces inflammation and blood thickness, and that the nervous system is altered within 2 seconds of grounding your feet into the soil. One of the things that we find in long-living cultures is their propensity to be outdoors and connect to nature, whether they're connected to the ground or connected to the trees and the forests. They're also exposed to the sun. Who of us doesn't realize the benefit of being exposed to the sun? We've all been taught that the sun energy from plants enters humans and is transferred to humans through food or through animals, which eventually goes to humans. But is it possible that we are able to capture the sun's energy and utilize it for energy directly? There's a study that actually shows that sunlight induces structure in water. And that structure holds energy through a charge separation, which simply means that catching the sun, which is routine in the blue zones, gives energy to your body. Getting outdoors, social connections. In these blue zones, people downshift, they spend time together, they eat mindfully, they meet each other on the streets and talk. It isn't the normal hurried pace that we're used to, and this is something that's consistent in all the cultures. Do you think this has something to do with it? And of course, joy and purpose. Purpose is really critical. I always talk about the fact that if you don't have joy and you don't have purpose, does the body really have a reason to stick around, a reason to function? Joy and purpose, in my opinion, are at the heart of long-living cultures. In our society, it isn't unusual to see people of this age sitting indoors in a retirement home without the connection to the nature and the people and the purpose and the joy. So the concept that there are these areas I'm telling you that joy is one of the important ones. And why is it that this translates so importantly is because we know that different emotions create different water structure. So joy, of course, creates a structure that changes the entire function in the body.
Let me just say that when the MRI was first being invented by Gilbert Ling, Raymond Damadian, and Freeman Cope, a slide that you saw before, they noticed that chronic degenerative disease tissues had water that was in chaos, and that by a dietary approach, which was the Gerson's diet therapy, this water would come back into order, and the aging process of that tissue would unage by up to 10 years. That's what we're seeing right here with the structuring chemistry of how water does its thing to be able to transmit things like epigenetic signals.
So what we've learned, there are these principles that we find that are common in long-living cultures, but we also realize that the water, the sun, the soil, the earth are a critical piece of this picture, which really isn't talked about and is something that I've learned the most about from Dr. Apsley, because this is what he has spent his last decade studying. So what happened to us? Henry Blackburn at the University of Minnesota wrote a book called Humans in Cages. Our modern lifestyle accelerates aging and chronic disease. It is no secret that civilization is man's biggest disease. And we start to see study after study showing that modern civilization is in itself a disease. And this disease of modern civilization has affected us. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So to the right, you see one of the great anthropologists, a surgeon in the British Army who lived for approximately 25 years with the Hunsakuts, eating with them, helping them to farm, watching their daily lifestyle. And from that, he conducted animal experiments, and he did a lot of physical examinations on peoples, not only with the Hunza, but he went down from the mountaintop looking at the same food, but grown in different soils. The animal studies that he conducted showed that the same exact food, but grown off of the mountaintop where the Hunzas lived, would contribute to chronic disease, but could be reversed when he gave those same animals the foods of the higher altitudes where the Hunzas lived. Now, if you look to the left, the same thing was reported with the humans that Price was studying, and then later on, Price teamed up with Pottinger, who was a physician, who then did cat experiments, and they showed the same thing, that cats fed raw milk, raw meat, and raw cod liver oil from good sources, healthy sources, would live indefinitely in peace, without parasites, without arthritis, without any chronic degenerative disease. But when you cooked those same three foods and fed them to another group of cats, by the third generation, they were either giving a lot of stillborn births or highly deformed babies. And when you reverse that, it took just as many generations to accomplish that. 3 generations down, 3 generations back up. So our work in this series will be how to do that in just our own generation, rather than have to wait for 3 generations to play catch up to that of the long living.
Right, we don't want to do that, right?
Right.
We want to accelerate this process, and that's what's so exciting about the advanced methods that we've been learning. So I want to explore and tell you briefly about a model that we've used over the last 15 years to reverse disease. And this model really has to do with optimizing the natural hormones and the nutrition, and that I call the fuel tank, detoxifying, and correcting and balancing the stress in the mind and the body, especially the oxygenation and the subconscious. Let's start a little bit with each one. So as a gynecologist, I realized quickly that generations before us lived well without hormone replacement. What happened to us? We know at this point that our oxygen, our fresh water, our land and soil, which I don't know who it was that said that when the nation's soil degenerates, the people come to an end. Who said that?
That was FDR.
Somebody said that.
FDR back in the late 30s.
So he knew what he was talking about, and it turns out that we're depleted. And the chaos in civilization creates chaos in the mind and body, which puts a demand on the adrenals to produce cortisol because it's our life hormone. And of course, we know that cortisol can be made from any of these other hormones. So if you're under a lot of stress, you're going to end up shunting your hormones to cortisol production because you need it to live. So when I started this process with ovarian hormones and replacing them, the thing I asked myself is, why is it that in long living cultures and past generations, we didn't see this? And the answer really lies in the fact that the base of the hormonal triangle is the adrenals and the cortisol and the thyroid. And one could make an argument that these are pretty much the same importance. But when these are functioning well, as they do in the long living areas, and we lose ovarian function, we really don't crash. But it turns out that in our modern civilization of chaos, we're consistently depleted on the cortisol pathway, which automatically knocks the thyroid out, giving us symptoms like low energy, low mental clarity, memory, focus, concentration, depression, and then finally, depletion of the sex hormones. So when we try to replace them in the 5-point model that we apply, we've always replaced all of them. But I think it's relevant to realize that this is one area which the long living don't need because their adrenals are actually quite strong. What about nutrition? And I learned about the role of nutrition in a funny way because in medical school we never really learned about nutrition. And I had early on, 15 years ago, a woman that I treated for 3 months with hormones and her own multivitamin mineral. And really after 3 months, she had no effect on her energy level, her weight, her memory, or her mood. And 3 months later, after I started her on certain levels of minerals, there was a big difference. So obviously, there's hormone activating levels of minerals. And when I realized that, I started to study the nutrients a lot more closely. And it turns out that specific nutrients activate specific hormones, like zinc is essential for estrogen and chromium is needed for progesterone. The thyroid activation needs iodine and selenium. It needs zinc. It needs vitamin B. This same effect is seen in plants. Plants demonstrate deficiencies when something is missing. And you can see the different colors when different things are deficient. It's really quite amazing. Magnesium deficiency, I have a plant right now I'm treating for a magnesium deficiency. So as plants demonstrate the nutritional deficiencies, so do humans. Tiredness, headaches, anxiety, weight gain, and of course diseases. Because nutrient deficiencies cause DNA damage, breaks, oxidation. And we have some really great news because in 2012, when we realized and had data showing that if you correct the deficiency, it repairs the DNA. And this is quite astounding and wonderful because if you, say, measure the nutrients and correct them in a woman who is about to get pregnant, you actually are correcting what she passes on to her offspring. Pretty powerful. So why all this attention to nutrients? And why do we have to think about even supplementing them? And this is because we have reduced nutrient in our soil. And a study that was done by the government showed a 50% reduction of all crop nutrients from 1950 to 1999. And I just want you to get a feeling for how sad this is. But the decline was anywhere from 30% to 80%. Vitamin C, carbohydrates, vitamin A. You don't see any pluses, right? Everything is negative. Top 34 crops, really overall a 50% change, 30% change in energy level, which means in order to get the same nutrition, you'd have to eat double or triple. So our nutrition program has 3 components, which include food, supplements, and measurement. But number 1 is food. And there's studies showing that organically grown food, not just organically certified, because lots of local farmers grow organically, can have 10 to 372% more nutrients. The organic growth increases antioxidants by about 30%. Vitamin C and iron are higher. And the reason why I really stress organically grown above non-GMO is because when you look at foods, you find that high pesticide residues remain in foods. So if they're non-GMO and they're grown with pesticides, you're still going to be getting the pesticides. So our recommendation for nutrition is to avoid the pesticides in GMO and eat organic or wild harvested. And I think the best example of wild harvested or local, I saw at the farmers market in Portland, because it becomes expensive to certify food as organic. And these photographs were taken by me when I spoke to the farmers and spoke to them about how they treat their soil and how they live and how they really treat the plants and what they put into it. So it doesn't always have to be certified. It should just be something that you can actually verify. The other category is wild harvested, which is crops that come from land that's not under any kind of agricultural management. So there's lots of choices. And to this, we usually recommend that people add nutrient-dense foods, which are superfoods. And there's many of them. And the idea is, since our soil is depleted, we can correct some of it by eating organic and some of it by adding nutrient-dense foods, and especially regenerative nourishment. Is that something that you can tell us about?
We're going to cover this in subsequent parts of our series, but basically it's embryonic foods that are high in growth factors. That is what enables the long living to continue to produce the amount of hormones that they need throughout their entire 110-year lifespan. And
it includes some of these things, right?
That's right.
Organ meats. And it's important to realize that we will be, this introduction is touching on a lot of things, but we'll be actually getting into how you're going to be able to do this over this series. But blue-green algae, sprouted nuts, bee pollen, sprouts, lots of yummy things. And then, of course, how people eat. And that is to eat mindfully. There's actually great data showing that we get more nutrition when we eat slowly and mindfully, as people do in some of these areas. So the basic food recommendations are to eat real food, plant, organic, superfoods, and regenerative nourishment. What about measurement? So that's the second component of our nutrition program, is measurement. And we use this on every single patient to make sure that their food intake and their supplement intake is actually adequate, is being absorbed, and is matching their activity levels. So measurement puts a lot of power into your hands so that you're not taking, say, supplements that you don't need. And luckily, insurance covers these tests. These are some of the common deficiencies we find in our population here, and these are the things we try to close so that we can regenerate like the long living. Number 3 is pure, effective supplements. And this is important. You'll hear a lot of controversy about supplements, but it turns out that the American Medical Association says it appears prudent for all adults to take vitamin supplements to prevent chronic disease. They said this in 2002, and the main reason is because suboptimal levels of things are associated with the disease. And the follow-up to that is, this is why Medicare actually ended up covering nutritional testing. So that's pretty powerful. The supplements that we always use in everybody is a multivitamin and an enteric-coated omega. So let's get to the third part of how we're regenerating like the long living. Detoxification. The organs of detoxification include the lymphatics, the skin, the liver, the intestines, the kidneys, and the lungs. The very first step to detoxification is optimal hydration. I call it adrenal aid. It includes pure structured water, 100 to 120 ounces, and we'll be getting into a lot of this in more detail, but pink salt, lemon, possibly honey, and the idea is to make sure that the base part of regeneration is there, which is pure structured water. To find out whether you're getting enough, you measure your pH. And we did an email blast this week. If you guys sign up for our newsletter, you'll see more detail on this. But you're aiming for a morning pH of about 6.7, and you know that you're able to detoxify. We also additionally use probiotics and seasonal cleanses, which we'll be covering in the next 3 webinars that we're going to be doing. And then comes the mind, both the conscious and the subconscious. So as far as the conscious mind, there's plenty of data, and it's covered by Bruce Lipton in his book, showing the power of our belief systems and our intentions on the actual outcome. The thing to realize is that the subconscious, which is almost 90%, is in the emotions of the heart. And it's estimated to be about 30,000 times more powerful than the conscious mind. And this seemed to be an impediment when we were doing our programs and unable to access what I call the subconscious, which lies in the heart. But we ended up being able to use a mechanism which is rather easy, and it's based upon measuring the heart rate variability. It turns out that the upper tracing is associated with a certain set of emotions and a lot of use of your fuel and a low immune system, impaired performance compared to the coherent positive one at the bottom. So we try to encourage people to learn these mechanisms because they do lower disease, and luckily they take 30 seconds to 5 minutes to learn. And it helps people preserve their fuel so that we don't, this is equivalent to the downshifting that we talk about in the long living cultures. And it has an effect on everybody because the heart produces the strongest electrical and magnetic field. So that means that that energetic field is affecting the structure of the water. And that energetic field is emitting 15 feet from the body in every direction, which simply means that it's a communication system between people and a communication system pretty much with everything. So by changing the coherence of our heart rhythm, we are able to affect our environment, the people, and the animals within it. Last but not least, we use mechanisms to oxygenate. And let's talk about that. So the first best way to oxygenate is to move. And I ask everybody to conduct a survey of their daily opportunities to move differently. Can you climb up the steps? Can you park in parking that's further than where you need to be? Can you mop the floor with your hand instead and sweep the floor instead of using the little robot? Any opportunity to move naturally is going to approximate what they do in the long living cultures, because aerobic exercises in the presence of oxygen develop stamina. What's the data on this? We also teach people not only to be more active, but to breathe consciously, because we know it increases the blood oxygen. Deep breathing increases focus and decreases depression and stress. Many studies show this. Blood pressure drops, endorphins are released, strengthens the immune system. What are we talking about? Coherent breathing, described in the New York Times, basically has to do with breathing in 5 breaths, holding it, breathing out 5 breaths. Another simple one is an energizing breath, where you inhale, draw your elbows back, and exhale quickly, thrusting the palms forward and repeating 10 to 15 times. This is a great way to pick yourself up in the middle of the afternoon. But there have been studies showing that we're just not breathing well, and just any attention to the breath at any time of the day can make a difference. Any opportunity to walk or to change your commute. In the US, we've engineered movement out of our daily lives. And the whole idea of exercise is to bring it back into an activity of daily living. Long distance, on inclines, active and breathe. This is what they do in long living areas. We have mechanisms that we can also use to accelerate this oxygen, which reverses disease. And we call it exercise with oxygen therapy. And there's plenty of scientific studies to support that exercising with oxygen therapy, which means hyperoxia at 90% plus oxygen as opposed to 21%, has a number of benefits, including recovery of muscle mass, microcirculation to all the organs, energy, pain, aging, inflammation. It's been calculated that 20 minutes of exercise in this form is equal to 2 hours of standard aerobic exercise. So this is something which all of you would want to know about. So how do you regenerate yourself? Like the long living, without a glacial melt, without necessarily the environment that they have, or the ability to socialize and relax? This is what we're going to be covering in our series. We cover balancing the natural hormones and how to correct that, correcting the nutrition, remedying the soil, the plants, the supplements, detoxifying. We're going to be covering water, pH, temperature, seasonal cleanses, how to get yourself into a coherent place and coherent heart rhythm, and how to oxygenate naturally, and how to oxygenate using technology that accelerates. So as we conclude, you'll be getting an invite. I would like you to join us for the detoxification series, which will go through the detail of the detoxification piece. It starts on the 15th of August and goes over 3 weeks, where we'll cover the why and how, the bowel protocols, and then the liver, gallbladder, kidney protocols. Let's see here. So, something in what I have done here is not right. Okay, here we go. So, are there any questions that anybody has? This will be on the website at mdprescriptives.com if anybody wants to do that. Do we plan to distribute the recording? Yes, it'll be on MD Prescriptives website. So I really want to thank you guys. I hope that you spend this evening downshifting, get disconnected, connect yourself to the earth, drink plenty of water, laugh, have joy, and regenerate like the long living. Do you have anything to say?
No, that's been great.